Happy Thanksgiving, America. So, Thanksgiving. Okay, right? Today's Thanksgiving, and we're going to learn a couple things about Thanksgiving. We're going to learn about a couple things about ourselves. Okay, America. Because America, I don't think you actually know really much about yourselves. Today is Thanksgiving Day. And what is Thanksgiving Day? Thanksgiving Day is the day that, the honorable Indians, right? Because you don't actually say the tribe. The tribe is the Wampanoags. Know that. The Wampanoags, that's, you know the tribe's name if you're not a racist. If you just say the Indians, then you don't actually know what you're celebrating. So 1621, the Wampanoags and the so-called Pilgrims, they had this big feast. Pilgrims almost died. The Indians, Squanto saved them, so Squanto teaches them how to hunt, how to cook, and they had this big feast to celebrate. Welcome to America, you know. Um, so that's the official story, but it's fucking bullshit. Okay, the holiday, it just shows the ridiculousness of all the fucking holidays. The holiday of Thanksgiving is the same thing as basically the rest of them. It's a cover for what it actually is supposed to be. It originated on some other shit. So Thanksgiving, while we talk about the feast, the 1621 feast, that was not a Thanksgiving. They didn't call it Thanksgiving. It wasn't officially declared. It was just a big fucking it was just a big meal, a big party, a big fall celebration. And the Indians actually had a celebration before the white people started having these Thanksgiving parties. And they had a ton of Thanksgiving parties. So there wasn't just one Thanksgiving, there was a whole shitload. Okay? Now, the first Thanksgiving, because these pilgrims, they have another Thanksgiving in 1623. So they have a 1621 Thanksgiving, then there's a 1623 Thanksgiving, and then there's a 1637 Thanksgiving. And the 1637 Thanksgiving, afterwards, that was officially declared by the government. So that was the first government declared Thanksgiving. It was a day of thanks for wiping out the Pequot. So 1637 was the Thanksgiving which wiped out the Pequot. And that's the Thanksgiving that our Thanksgiving is actually based upon. So you don't know about yourselves. What Thanksgiving Day actually is a whitewashed green corn festival. The Wampanoags used to have a green, or the Pequot had a green corn festival. Every fall they would have a green corn festival, and then that's what Thanksgiving Day celebrates. It's a fall festival. It's at the end. It's when winter is coming, winter is approaching us, and so we have a festival saying, let's get ready for winter, okay? And then there's a spring festival, right? There's also the equinox. Christmas and Easter falls on the summer and winter equinox. And like I said, all the holidays, it don't make any sense. None of the holidays make any sense. You go down the list. You have Christmas. Christmas is the birth of baby Jesus, right? The baby Jesus is the Savior of the world. He's coming to save all of humanity of their sins. And because baby Jesus was born 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem, in the Middle East, that's why we have a big fat dude with a red suit who goes around eating all of our fucking cookies with 8 reindeer that fly in the sky and land on our roofs, and he jumps in their chimney and puts presents underneath a big evergreen tree. And then we all pick those presents up the next morning because we were good children throughout the whole year. How in the fuck did baby Jesus turn into Santa Claus? How did Thanksgiving? Okay, so I'll tell you what Thanksgiving is. We're celebrating the wrong one. The real Thanksgiving is 1637, the Pequot War. The Pequot War, the Puritans, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, who are different than the Pilgrims, the Puritans, they set the Pequot village on fire and burned 400 and 500 Indian women, children, and old men and women. They had a green corn festival. The warriors weren't there, so instead of actually engaging in traditional, civilized, war where the militia of one group meet up with the militia of another group, they just engaged in total warfare, just straight up terrorism. So the Puritans engaged in terrorism. The Puritans in 1637 engaged in total war terrorism. They first time, the Indians never fought the way the English fought. The way the English fought was to wipe out the Pequot. The Indians never wiped out a tribe. They never fought. There was revenge killings, but they never fought to wipe out an entire nation. And that's what the Massachusetts Bay Colony did. Afterwards, they declare a day of Thanksgiving. A day of Thanksgiving is declared because thank you, God, that we have wiped the Pequot out, and the Pequot will never kill us. They fucked up. Two English people had been killed, and they thought it was the Pequot. They blamed it on the Pequot, but the Pequot didn't do none of that. So they declared war on them. They wiped them out. They declared Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving is the celebration of a massacre of 400 to 500 people. They declared Thanksgiving right after that big-ass massacre on Mystic River, the Mystic River Massacre. So you have the Mystic River Massacre, which is 400, 500 people slaughtered, and then the whole war was 200 more people because they nearly wiped out the Pequot. The Pequot had to run to the Cherokee and to some of the other tribes. So that's what we're celebrating. Every time we celebrate Thanksgiving, the first Thanksgiving was when the Pequot was wiped out. So that's what Thanksgiving is. Yeah, thanks be to God, we've wiped the Pequot out. So, yeah, good fucking day, America. This is a day we're going to say, thank you. Thanks to God for wiping out the Pequot. Thank you for starting a total warfare, terroristic tactic that will begin a genocide that will wipe out over 100 million Native Americans on the American continents. So, after 1637, that wasn't, like I said, that wasn't the only Thanksgiving. There was a couple Thanksgiving in Texas in like the 1500s. So, there's a whole shit ton of Thanksgivings after the 1637 Pequot War, after the genocidal, terroristic, total warfare, just wiping out Hitler-esque, more than Hitler, because, Hitler actually didn't accomplish it. We're the Pequot. I don't see any Pequot. So there's a whole shit ton of Thanksgivings, okay? And so after the Pequot War, you have all the Thanksgivings, and all these Thanksgivings are being celebrated because you wiped out some Indians. Every time they wiped out a shit ton of Indians, every time there was a big massacre of Native Americans, the next day they would have this big, fantastic Thanksgiving feast. So that's Thanksgiving. They started having so many Thanksgiving feasts everywhere, spontaneous, arbitrary, all throughout the colonies, that eventually the colonial government of the Revolutionary Army and George Washington declares Thanksgiving, so that way there's only one day that everybody can celebrate the massacre of the Indians. And by the time the colonial government or the continental government, the Continental Congress and George Washington get to declare Thanksgiving, there's hardly any Native Americans to speak of. So Thanksgiving is a day that after a whole shit ton of Native Americans are slaughtered and killed, the Christians would get together and pray to Jesus and pray to their God that the Indians won't hurt them no more. And it was horseshit, it was hypocritical, and they're completely brainwashed. They weren't acting like Christians. They did not do what Jesus would want them to do. They murdered people in cold blood. Jesus was murdered in cold blood. If anything, the Puritans were more like the Roman Empire. They were imperialistic. They were in other people's, land. And while they was on their own land, they're massacring and killing them. So America, you don't know about yourselves. You don't understand Thanksgiving. It's a whitewashed holiday. You don't want to remember the genocide. So then later on, you started looking at, you saw this feast and you said, hey, let's turn this day of Thanksgiving into something else. We can't be celebrating massacre of Native Americans, it's not Christian-like, right? It is very Christian-like. It very much follows in the tradition of the Spanish Inquisition and the Catholic Church in England, all the Irish, the Protestants, right? All the warfare. The right-wing Catholic Church caused more warfare in Europe than most other organizations or groups or nations combined. And everybody, you know, Protestants, it's the Ku Klux Klan. The Protestants was the 1855 riots, Know Nothing riots. So, and the Protestants were the Puritans. So very much is in line with the practice of Christianity. Some people can take a bastardized form of Christianity and use it to justify any bullshit. Christianity was used to justify slavery. Christianity is used to justify the massacre and genociding and raping of an entire nation of peoples, such as the Native Americans, by the Puritans. Even the first story, the 1621 Pilgrim Wampanoag story, that was a meeting about a treaty signing. So they had this big-ass festival and this big meeting to butter the Wampanoags out so they would sign a document that allows the Plymouth plantation to have over 1,000 acres. So that's wonderful. Plymouth plantation, eventually the New England colonies, Salem and Boston and Plymouth, they become major traders in the slave trade. So they get all these pieces of property. They're merchants, so they're business, they're capitalists, right? They're not. It's not. Some of them came over for religious freedom, but most of the plantation colony came over here to get rich on the New World, to get all the stuff, ship it back, make a bunch of money. And once they wiped out all the Indians, and they started enslaving the Indians, and then the ones they couldn't enslave or didn't need, they would ship to the Caribbean, and they would sell them for rum or sugar or supplies. So that started the slave trade. So the so-called good Christian Puritans, they're the ones genociding Native Americans. They started the slave trade. And then eventually, it wasn't sustainable. There wasn't any more Indians to enslave, so they started buying slaves from Africa. So the Native American genocide, the enslavement of the Native Americans, eventually turned into the enslavement of the Africans. So this is the day. This is Thanksgiving, right? We all get together, and it's a big feast. And the 1621 Bountiful Feast is a nice myth. It's a nice little tale. And I like the smorgasbord of food on Thanksgiving. Turkey is native to America, so there's some things that are right. Pumpkin's native to America. So turkey and pumpkin, those are consistent with native species of animals and plants. And a smorgasbord of food is good. Right before the winter time, let's have a big party, a fall festival. Let's have a green corn fall festival. And what is a green corn fall festival? It's like some sort of powwow, or you have some corn, you probably burn a pile of corn or something. So Thanksgiving, we need to change Thanksgiving. Instead of having a whitewashed day, we need to change the whole thing. We need to recognize the truth about ourselves. We need to recognize that this entire country, white America, exists because of the genocide of Native Americans. So we benefit from the crimes of our ancestors, and there can never be any justice on a stolen land. So since there can never be justice on a stolen land, we really need to put our heads together. Historical justice would be for them to genocide us back, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. So what we need is, what would we have done, think about if we were the Pilgrims or the Puritans. What would we do today to make it better? We still want the land, but can we coexist? Can we try the experiment of integration? Can we peacefully coexist side by side? There's several ways we could have gone about sharing this continent with the native people here. Just because the English wrote shit down and they had got used to doing things a certain way, you know, really writing things down was the big thing. They would write a deed down, and then that piece of ground was theirs. And the Native Americans didn't understand that. They didn't, it was, you know, the land and the earth was everybody's. They also didn't understand our sex hierarchy. Their women worked out in the fields, and they looked at the men and wondered why the men were doing women's work. And they thought that the English men pampered and babied their women, while the Native Americans were actually out there. They controlled the food source.